Lauren Hayes had always believed that a good marriage was built on trust, routine, and shared dreams. Their home in Naperville, Illinois, a white colonial with black shutters and a wraparound porch, was everything she'd ever wanted. Daniel had surprised her with it on their 5th anniversary, handing her the keys wrapped in a red bow while she ugly cried into his shoulder. That was 4 years ago. Now, on a Thursday evening in late October, Lauren stood at the stove stirring a pot of lobster bisque, Daniel's favorite, watching the driveway through the kitchen window.
He was late. Again.
The clock above the refrigerator read 8:47 p.m. He texted at 6, "Working late, don't wait up." She waited anyway. She always did. Lauren was 33, a high school English teacher with hazel eyes, auburn hair she usually kept in a messy bun, and the kind of quiet beauty that didn't announce itself loudly. She had married Daniel at 27 in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Back then, everything about them made sense. His ambition complemented her patience, his loudness balanced her calm. She poured the bisque into 2 bowls and sat at the kitchen island alone, eating slowly, listening to the silence of a house built for 2. Daniel Hayes was, by every external measure, a success story. He'd grown up in Evanston, the son of a plumber and a nurse, and had clawed his way to senior vice president of operations at a Chicago-based logistics firm by the time he was 35. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark stubble he never quite shaved and a smile that still made Lauren's stomach flip when he aimed it at her, which she had noticed over the past 8 months, had become increasingly rare. In the elevator of the Martin Bridge Tower on Michigan Avenue, Daniel stood shoulder to shoulder with Cassandra Cole, their fingers barely touching as they waited for the doors to close. "You have to stop looking at me like that," Cassandra murmured, staring straight ahead. "Like what?" "Like I'm something you can't have." Daniel laughed softly, a private laugh. "I was just thinking about the Whitmore account."
"Sure you were."
The elevator doors opened. They walked in opposite directions. It was past 11 when Daniel finally walked through the front door. Lauren was on the couch with a glass of Malbec and a book she hadn't been reading. "Hey," he said, setting his keys on the console table without looking up. He smelled like aftershave. He'd showered. At the office. "Hey. Bisque still on the stove?" "I put it in the fridge." He went to the kitchen without asking anything else. Not how her day was, not whether her mother had called back, not why she was still awake. Lauren watched him move through their kitchen like he was a guest in a hotel, efficient, distracted, somewhere else entirely. She turned back to her book and stared at the same paragraph she'd been staring at since 9 o'clock. Something was wrong. She had known it for months. She just hadn't yet allowed herself to name it. Cassandra Cole had not set out to become anyone's secret. She was the director of business development at Martin Bridge. Sharp, ambitious, unbothered by men who underestimated her. She had grown up in Atlanta, moved to Chicago at 24 for a graduate degree in finance, and had spent the last 8 years building a career with a kind of focus that left little room for anything else. She was 32, owned a loft in River North, drove a black BMW, and had a laugh that made entire rooms turn their heads. She had met Daniel Hayes 14 months ago at an internal leadership summit. He was presenting quarterly projections. She was supposed to be taking notes. Instead, she found herself watching the way his hands moved when he was confident, slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. They'd had their first real conversation in the parking garage afterward. Within 3 weeks, they were having drinks on the rooftop of the Pendry. Within 2 months, they were something neither of them had a word for. Tonight, sitting across from him at a quiet corner table at Oriole, Cassandra watched Daniel's eyes and understood something she hadn't been ready to understand before. He was never going to leave his wife. "I need you to tell me what this is," Cassandra said, setting her wine glass down carefully. Daniel was quiet for a moment. He had the particular stillness of a man who had been caught off guard but refused to show it. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. What are we doing? Because I have been pretending for almost a year that this is casual, and Daniel, it is not casual. Not for me." He reached across the table. She let him take her hand, which she would later consider a mistake. "You know how I feel about you," he said quietly. "I know how you feel about me in hotel rooms," she said. "I don't know how you feel about me when you go home." The silence that followed lasted long enough to answer her question. Cassandra pulled her hand back slowly. She looked out at the city lights, the navy November sky, the faint headlights crawling down Michigan Avenue below. She had not cried over a man since she was 22. She did not intend to start now. Daniel sat in his Audi in the parking garage of their building for 23 minutes before going upstairs. He had his hands on the steering wheel and the engine off, watching his own reflection in the dark windshield. He wasn't a bad man. He had always told himself that. He coached Little League in the summers. He called his mother every Sunday. He had never, in 9 years of marriage, raised his voice at Lauren. But he had also been lying to her for 14 months. And the lies had calcified into something almost structural, part of the architecture of his daily life, until he no longer noticed their weight. He pulled out his phone and looked at the last text from Lauren: "Leftover pasta in the fridge if you're hungry.
Sleep well. Red heart."
He stared at the little red heart for a long time. Then he put the phone in his pocket, got out of the car, and rode the elevator upstairs to the life he had not yet chosen to blow apart. Lauren first voiced her suspicions to Marcus Webb on a Saturday afternoon in December, over oat milk lattes at a coffee shop on Main Street in Naperville. Marcus had been her best friend since college. He was a graphic designer, divorced once, endlessly perceptive, and constitutionally incapable of sugarcoating things. He was the person Lauren called when she needed to hear the truth. "His phone is face down," Lauren said, staring into her cup.
Always.
Like, he used to leave it on the counter face up. Now it's always face down. That could be nothing. He also changed his passcode. Marcus set his latte down.
Okay. When? August.
"I noticed because I used to use his phone sometimes when mine was charging, and then one day it just didn't work." Marcus was quiet for a moment.
Lauren.
"What's your gut telling you?" She looked up at him, and her eyes were very still. "My gut has been telling me something is wrong for 8 months. I just kept telling my gut to shut up."
She didn't snoop.
She told herself she wouldn't, and for 3 weeks she kept that promise. Then, on a Wednesday night when Daniel was at what he called a client dinner, Lauren sat down at the desk in the home office and opened their shared credit card account on her laptop. It took her 12 minutes to find the first charge she couldn't explain: a hotel in the West Loop she'd never heard of. $289.
A Tuesday in September.
A Tuesday she remembered because it was the night their neighbor's dog had gotten loose and she'd spent an hour helping round it up, and when she'd called Daniel to tell him the funny story, he'd been quiet and distracted, said he was still at the office.
She kept scrolling. 3 more hotel charges.
A restaurant she didn't recognize in River North. Flowers, $84, from a florist she'd never received flowers from. Lauren sat back in the chair. The house was very quiet. She could hear the furnace running, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her hands were completely steady, which surprised her. She had expected to shake. Instead she felt something cold and crystalline settle into her chest. The feeling of a thing you already knew finally arriving in a form you could no longer ignore. The next morning, she watched him over breakfast. Daniel ate his eggs, scrolled his phone, refilled his coffee. He kissed her on the cheek before he left, the kind of automatic habitual kiss that has divorced itself entirely from feeling, and told her he'd try to be home by 7. Lauren smiled and said, "Okay." She watched his car pull out of the driveway from the kitchen window. Then she stood very still for a long time, her coffee going cold in her hands, looking at the empty street.
She had 2 choices. She could confront him.
Or she could wait until she knew everything, all of it, before she said a single word. Lauren Hayes was, above all things, a woman who believed in being sure before she acted. She was thorough. She was a planner. And so she chose to wait, and to watch, and to gather, until the picture was complete.
It took 3 more weeks.
The night Lauren found out the full truth, it had just started to snow.
She had followed him.
She wasn't proud of it. She had parked her Volvo half a block down from the Nobu Hotel in the West Loop and watched him walk in at 8:15 p.m., in the dark gray coat she had bought him for Christmas 3 years ago, holding the door for a woman in a black blazer with dark hair who moved like someone who was used to being watched. Lauren sat in her car for 40 minutes.
The heat was on.
A song she'd always loved came on the radio, and she turned it off because she couldn't stand the feeling of it. She watched the snow collect on the windshield in small, silent increments until her view was half obscured.
She didn't go inside. She didn't call him.
She drove home, made herself a cup of chamomile tea, and sat at the kitchen island in the dark, waiting for the feeling to arrive, the devastation, the screaming grief she'd braced for. Instead, there was only that cold, crystalline calm. Like walking out onto frozen water and discovering it holds your weight. When Daniel walked in at 11:30, Lauren was sitting in the armchair facing the front door, all the lights on, the folder of credit card statements on the coffee table in front of her.
He stopped in the doorway. "Lauren, don't."
He closed the door behind him slowly. She watched him look at the folder, and she watched him understand what it meant.
"How long have you known?" he asked. "Long enough."
She kept her voice level. "I want to ask you one thing, and I need you to answer me honestly. Not for my sake, I think we're past that."
"For yours. How long?"
He sat down on the couch, elbows on his knees, and looked at the floor. The snow was still falling outside the big living room window. In another life, it would have been beautiful.
14 months, he said finally. Lauren nodded.
Like she was confirming a calculation.
Okay, she said quietly.
Then she stood up, picked up her mug, and walked upstairs to the guest room. She locked the door behind her. She did not cry until she heard his footsteps stop outside it, and then she pressed her hand over her mouth and cried so quietly that he never heard a sound. Daniel slept in their bedroom that night, which felt obscene. He lay on top of the covers in his clothes and stared at the ceiling. The house had a particular silence that he had never noticed before. Or perhaps it was a new silence, one that had never existed until tonight. He thought about the first apartment they'd shared in Lincoln Park. He thought about the way Lauren used to read out loud to him from whatever novel she was into, doing voices for all the characters. He thought about the vineyard in Napa and the way she'd laughed when the flower girl dropped the basket and scattered petals all over the wrong aisle. He had not left her for Cassandra. He had not left her at all. He had simply, incrementally cowardly, started living two lives, telling himself each time that the next time would be the last time, until the lie became its own kind of truth. Now the guest room door was locked, and the snow was falling, and Daniel Hayes finally understood what he had actually done. Lauren called a divorce attorney on a Monday morning in January, 6 days after the confrontation. She sat in the bright, clean office of Patricia Nguyen on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Naperville, wearing a slate blue dress and her hair down, and she laid out the facts with the same methodical clarity she brought to lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences. Patricia Nguyen, who had seen every variety of marital dissolution in 22 years of family law, told her afterward that she'd rarely had a client come in so prepared. The house is in both names.
Patricia asked. Yes.
Any joint accounts besides the credit card?
2.
I've already spoken to our bank. Patricia looked at her over the rim of her glasses. Ms. Hayes, are you sure about this? Lauren thought about the guest room door, and the 14 months, and the automatic kiss. She thought about the bisque gone cold in the fridge. I have never been more sure of anything, she said. Cassandra Cole heard about the divorce from Daniel himself, in a terse phone call in early February. He told her that Lauren had found out, that it was over between them, that he was hoping to salvage his marriage.
She almost laughed.
She's divorcing you, Cassandra said flatly.
A pause.
We're trying to work through.
Daniel.
She's divorcing you.
I know women.
She's divorcing you.
Another silence.
Then, I thought maybe we could.
No, Cassandra said. And she hung up.
She sat in her River North loft for a long time after that, watching the February light move across the hardwood floors. She had known from the beginning that this would end. She just hadn't expected to feel so little relief. And she hadn't expected to feel so much like she owed a woman she'd never met an apology she had no right to offer. She deleted his number from her phone. Then she went for a run along the lakefront in 19-degree weather, and breathed the cold air in hard, and started the long work of putting herself back together. By April, the house was sold. Lauren stood on the front porch on the morning the movers came, coffee in hand, watching the dogwood in the front yard that she had planted herself 4 springs ago. It was blooming, white and extravagant, completely indifferent to the fact that her marriage had ended. The house was going to a young couple from Oak Park, and she was moving into a 2-bedroom apartment near the school where she taught. Marcus stood beside her, his own coffee in hand, saying nothing, because he knew her well enough to know she didn't need him to say anything. Finally, Lauren said, I thought this would feel worse. Does it feel bad? She considered the question honestly. It feels like the end of something. But also like the end of something that ended a long time ago, and I just wasn't ready to see it.
Marcus nodded.
For what it's worth, and I mean this, you're going to be absolutely fine. Lauren looked at the dogwood. She thought about the 9 years, the vineyard wedding, the bisque she'd let go cold. She thought about the locked guest room door and the cold, steady feeling that had arrived in her chest and never really left. The feeling, she now understood, of a woman finally deciding to tell the truth to herself.
I know, she said.
And for the first time in a very long time, she meant it.